The nature of monkey was irrepressible.
Hello, lovelies. I thought, since unfortunately our extra session of tabletopless.org tonight has been called off due to bad technology issues, and since I missed doing a comments response last week, I'd do one now to fill the time. So why not? Let's delve into the YouTube comments, which I'm sure will be an interesting mix of abuse and and nonsense. Okay, we're not doing that one. That's incoherent. That was a reply to one of my Kalergi Plan videos. Sunsin1592 says, the difference with DCC's novelty dice is that you can use them in other games, as opposed to the symbol novelty dice. I use them all the time for other games, rather than, say, disadvantage, roll a d16 instead of a d20. If someone aims a missile weapon or has some special skill or weapon, roll d24 instead of a d20. Yeah, and there's some sets where you can get d60s as well now. Not the DCC sets, but 60 is a very useful number because it's one of the most divisible numbers by a whole variety of other things, so it's very useful in that way. So yeah, worth picking up a D60 if you see one. Falcon8467 says about my review of Blades in the Dark, I believe you've read the rules wrong when you describe rolls. When you roll for a stat, say Tinker, you just roll how many dots you have in Tinker, not Insight plus Tinker. And yes, he's right, unlike most people that have a go at me when I review something that they love and that I don't. I think he's correct. I hadn't dug the actual book out to check, but I did check the online open version, and that seemed to be worded a bit clearer, so there you go. What else have we got? Paddy's Parlour says, creating systems and putting together zines has become my new favourite hobby. I think anyone with an inkling to do it should. And that was on one of the Roll for Insights with Mr. Ryan David. I have a lot of Roll for Insights. A bunch of people all decided they wanted to participate all at the same time, which has created a massively daunting pile of editing that I need to do. So I'll get to that at some point. But yes, I mean, on the one hand, yeah, you want to encourage people to be creative. On the other hand, we don't really want the competition. So ignore Paddy's Parlour there, I think. That would be a better thing to do. Stephen Ransom 47 commenting on my review of Valerian, the complete collection, the French comic books. So thank you very much for covering this. Being an old school fan of heavy metal and Omni and sci-fi in general, I was equally disappointed in Luke's film adaptation. This genre of storytelling has been almost entirely broken. Yeah, the early comics in the series are perhaps a bit more childish and cartoony, but the later ones are a lot more mature and interesting. And yeah, Continental comics are a very different beast to British comics or American comics. But yeah, it can feel like these things are all being bastardized and homogenized, but it doesn't have to be that way. Find things that don't do that and support them. There's no need to be ideological about it, even. Just don't let yourself be guilt-tripped for liking what you like. Chris J5505 comments on my review of Iron Kingdom's Requiem that he loves the 5th edition version, absolutely loved the 3.5 version also. Hasn't played the 2d6 system one yet, but may consider it at some point. He says, I prefer D&D as I'm old school. Plenty of other games are also old school. Mind you, I'll heavily modify the 5th edition version with other third-party materials, 5e is a great base system to build upon, simple yet elegant, but allows room for lots of crunch to be added if one wishes. Not sure how the 2d6 system would hold up in a dungeon crawling scenario. Iron Kingdoms began as a 3.5 setting as the roots of the game. I'm glad they came back to the D&D fold. Hoping they will collaborate with Kobold Press, since Wizards is a sinking ship and they have worked with Wolfgang Bauer in the past. Yeah, I'm not sure how that's going to work out. The whole Kobold Press thing is massively disappointing, actually. Great fanfare and lots of support during the whole OGL fiasco, but then it turns out that they're not really doing anything interesting at all. The 2d6 system works pretty well in a dungeon crawl type setting, because especially if you use minis and maps and so on, because it is really a more skirmishy version of the war game, essentially, and you could transpose things back and forth without too much trouble. The main problem I found with the 2d6 system was that at higher levels it completely broke. Characters became way too powerful compared even to powerful monsters, so you get that problem in loads of games, so it's not a unique thing. Ship 6108 comments on one of my Kalergi Plan videos. I'm so glad he forgot the apostrophe in I'm, but he did capitalize, so that's something. I'm so glad the comments see through the BS of this video. Stumbled at the end and didn't put a full stop. I have to keep explaining this to these people, that the argumentum ad populum is a logical fallacy for a reason, and my video seems to be allowed on YouTube because it is a debunking of the conspiracy, which seems to be why it turns up on searches by these crazy people, who then proceed to throw a shit fit in the comments, but never, strangely, produce any contradictory message or refutation of what I'm saying. There's just nothing. They just assert that it's obvious that XYZ is happening and that Kalergi is behind it somehow, and that's all we get to. They can't point to anything. It's just pointless. But it does give me an endless parade of retarded racists to make fun of. So yeah, that's something. Okay, this is negative, but I think it's important. So I did a video quite a while back now called "The OSR is being destroyed by the right wing," which was kind of a response to some nonsense that was going around at the time. And Mr. C. Schultzke 26 says, "I grew up in the 70s and 80s, so did I. D&D drawn Northern European, medieval and Dark Age myths. Me and all my friends who played it were white, and we felt a visceral connection to the genre's motifs, visual style and literary antecedents. It wasn't right-wing, it was normal. These days, if you don't embrace your own race's destruction through immigration, you are right-wing. Something which says more about the left than it does normal people. If you want woke, inclusive RPGs that contain absurd anachronistic imagery like blacks in full plate mail, designed more to rub white's nose in woke politics than anything else, go for it. No one will stop you. Just don't complain about others who want nothing to do with it. The left injects politics into everything and then complains about the result. And yet here you are." Right. There are non-racist, non-fascistic comments to be made. There are reasonable demands for sensible historical grounding, and respect for cultures and races should be equal to all cultures and races. Diversity for diversity's sake is not a good thing, but I think it's really important to let you know that I am not on your side either. I am far left in a class analysis. The woke skulls, in my estimation, as someone with an actual education in politics and history, aren't really left-wing, and it's really important that people like you do not mistake my anger at their authoritarian BS for support for your racism, anti-immigration rhetoric, and your authoritarian BS. Right? Games should be free for anyone to make up whatever they want in whatever mix they want. And it is both people like you and woke skulls that try to impose their designs on everyone else. So I'm not on your side either. Right? I'm not altogether on anybody's side because nobody is altogether on my side. Right. More nonsense. Red Army 1778, which seems a rather contradictory name, says about the Kalergi plan again. Kalergi was a Zionist, and many powerful Zionists, yes, he said Zionists, not Zionists, and he forgot to capitalize at the start of the sentence, have said, quote, he then fails to quote, Europe of old will no longer write history as they will be turned into a Negro race and there's nothing they can do to stop it. Fail to end quote. I could not find that quote anywhere, so I don't know what he's talking about. English, well, he remembered to capitalize that. English border, B-O-A-R-D, is being invaded every week by thousands of young males. Every week. That repetition was not needed. Enough is enough, and failed to do a full stop. Yeah, it's kind of telling, really. I mean, you shouldn't judge too much, but no grammar, no spelling, and yet they think they've got the world figured out in all its intricacies. No, we are not being invaded every week by thousands of young men. We have people coming here seeking asylum, not invading. There's no gunfights in the streets. They haven't seized the airports. Don't be absurd. The problem we have in this country at the moment is a lack of immigration, because we've closed off all the legitimate routes. People who are coming here are coming here via other means. Dangerous, expensive, exploited means. He goes on to try and argue, but he's fucking retarded, so nonsense. And calls me super woke. so take that, woke moralists. I'm apparently on your side. What else have we got here? Martin Tepley 1145 commenting on the release of the Sexbots Redux Machinations of the Space Princess, says he just bought it and it's great stuff, which is good. I'm sure T-shirt will be happy with that. I also got my print proof, which looks pretty good, even on the budget colour printing. It doesn't have the depth of shading and contrast that I might prefer, but it looks fine. It's a very nice looking little book. Okay, so I reviewed Cyberpunk Tales from the Red and Interface 1 on a video, the same one I reviewed the cheap DCC dice on. The Zampa says, talking about the Graph 3, the giraffe sort of forklift truck thing. One could argue the hit points for vehicles and drones are until it can't function anymore, not really until they are destroyed beyond repair. It works without restrictions until it hits 0, which doesn't completely save everything, but at least feels a bit more reasonable in my view. I can see why you might make that argument, but I do think it explicitly says that the vehicle is basically wrecked at that point. And most vehicles can soak up a lot of small arms fire without being really wrecked. There's a lot of empty space. There's a lot of stuff that isn't essential, and the most essential parts of vehicles tend to be the most robust. Cyberpunk 2020 felt about right to me. Maximum Metal, in particular, felt right to me, though I'm not so sure about the ACPA damage levels. They always felt a little bit low. But then you compare and contrast 2020 and Max Metal to Cyberpunk Red, and vehicles are just absurdly fragile. So I don't think that fixes it. And while I'm reluctant to just hit point bloat everything, that does seem to be the quickest and easiest way to fix it. So yeah. The Zampa also says, I'm running a game in Cyberpunk Red for about 2 years now. I'm checking out every monthly DLC, and yes, you can get them for free, except the drone one. I love to look at them, check if I can use anything for my game. For example, I've taken the wheelchair and just reskinned it into a heavy backpack, installed grip feet and jump legs, and a grapple gun, and offered it as a spaceship salvager's jump pack. The wheelchair is an insanely strong item for $1,000, offering cyberware option slots protected by EMP and without humanity loss. Yeah, that's the same problem with her version of the combat wheelchair for fantasy games. It's absurdly cheap and absurdly good in that case, to the point where it doesn't really make sense for all adventurers not to be wheeling themselves about. It becomes absurd. I mean, that wheelchair with its cyber legs, you would think that would be at least 4,000 just for the legs, if they're comparable to cyberware. But yeah, that's not what it's about, is it? It's a papal indulgence having that kind of thing in your game. Okay, Venus Boys 3 on the same review says that lady in the cyber chair doesn't appear particularly disabled, crossed legs. My old dad can't do that, but he can still walk. Maybe she's just lazy. Maybe cyber chairs are like high-tech rickshaws for tourists to lounge in while shopping for sex workers, nannies. Okay, let's not call disabled people lazy, shall we? And there are some people who have to use a chair some of the time, but not all of the time. So that's an important thing to consider, especially since it's Disability Pride Month. So I know you were just joking, but yeah. Liberal Hyena 9760 says about the cheap DCC dice I mentioned. The dice shop online sells DCC dice sets for between £22.50 and £27, depending how fancy they are. You don't mention who manufactures the set you showed. I don't know. Or its quality, standard quality for these kind of dice, roughly comparable to the actual DCC branded dice that I do have. So, yeah. Impact Dice is the manufacturer of the official DCC sets, as well as non-DCC specific ones, I think, i.e. without the tube and label. While it is no doubt reasonable, and in most people's perceptions quite sufficient, to say a plastic die is a plastic die, it would be of interest, particularly to the more neurodiverse among your audience, such as myself, to know whether there is a qualitative difference between them and the cheaper sets. As a champion of RPG consumer rights, such an assessment surely falls within your remit. They're fine. My neurodivergence is in depression and anxiety rather than fixation on details. They are perhaps very, very slightly more rounded at the edges than the DCC dice, but I don't think sufficiently to make a difference. The D24 doesn't quite sit as flat as the DCC one, but I would say good enough, and at half the price that you quoted, so 10 to 12 quid for novelty dice, plus you get all your normal dice as well. I think it's worth a punt. What else? Truffle on the Cyberpunk reviews again. Why does this even exist? Is something I asked about the cyber wheelchair. And Truffle says, because the person who created it for D&D, on the basis that there were wheelchairs in the Forgotten Realms, worked for our Talzorian. So, of course, she got it put into the Talzorian book. There was one wheelchair made for the royal court, name currently forgotten, just the one, with no special abilities or magical configuration. But that's the excuse for having an insanely overpowered, unbeatable mount in your fantasy campaign. Yeah, you see, that's the problem. Okay, I'm disabled. I keep mentioning it because apparently it's valuable to be open about it, not for sympathy. This isn't representation to me. I also don't understand the mindset where I'm going to play a fantastical character who looks like me and has all the exact same problems as me. That doesn't sound appealing. And it's the same problem as insisting that every single place is completely multicultural and has a representative population equal to, Seattle or San Francisco or something. It doesn't make sense, and it always ends up throwing me out of the game. There were historical wheelchairs, but nothing like this kind of thing, and not all fantasy settings are as magical as D&D. Not even all D&D settings are as magical as the Forgotten Realms or Eberron, where perhaps you could make a case for this sort of thing, but it's not there for the game, and that's really the problem, isn't it? It's there for the player. It's there to, and I hate to use the term, but it's there to virtue signal. Like I was saying earlier, it's a papal indulgence. Look, we put this much shiny progressive stuff in our game. Well, okay, at the expense of suspension of disbelief, verisimilitude, immersion, and so on. But maybe because we've put that there, you'll overlook something a little less PC elsewhere. Who knows? And having said something that will get me written off in some quarters as right-wing, another reply from another genius to my Kalergi Plan video. Texas Arcane says, yawn, kosher agitprop, discarded, though he failed to punctuate properly, though he did remember a full stop at the end, so, progress. But that comment is not a refutation, nor an argument, and just immediately exposing yourself as an anti-Semitic conspiracy theorist in like 4 words. That's efficient. That's very efficient. Well done. I went on to try and argue, but fail. I do not understand this next comment. So ages ago I did a video on the really actually quite fascinating He-Man lore Bible, and that gets a lot of hits a lot of the time. I think even Fat Bob, Movie Blob, he tweeted it out at some point, and that drove a lot of traffic to it, so it did good numbers, and it still does good numbers. But Spiderweb3008 says, it's crazy how He-Man really was an archangel in the Tanakh and other books from Babylon, right there with Gabriel and Michael. There were over 100 angels with power and dominion over people. And Spiderweb's writing seems rather reminiscent of that of schizophrenics, like it's very blah, 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 and no spaces after punctuation. So yeah, that was fun. I don't know what the fuck he's talking about, but there you go. Shinigami author on the Cyberpunk video said, "You said representation in the same mocking fashion as Nerdrotic. Fellow Nerdrotic enjoyer confirmed." No, I think I get that from some black guy who is well worth a follow. So, and Ryan David, who's being hosted on the channel at the moment, says, "And I bought the dice." We're referring to the DCC dice. Can't go wrong. Plus, you get the D60, so you know. Aaron the Relentless made an interesting comment again on the Cyberpunk video. He says, a problem with a lot of older RPG companies is a tendency to ignore their back catalogue and see how they did things in the past. Essentially the problem of humans not learning from history on a micro scale. Yeah, I think that is true. I mean, in coming up with a new edition of Cyberpunk, why would you not look back at 2020 and how things developed in 2020 and what was successful and what wasn't, and why would you not integrate all of that into a new edition? I think Red is in many ways too simplistic. Cyberpunk has always had a heavy side that leans into the techno fetishism, you know, the guns with all the options, and they became quite individual, and some of them use different dice and all of that, and there's none of that in Red. It's pretty much an assault rifle is an assault rifle is an assault rifle, and the maximum metal vehicle rules were way better. There's a whole bunch of stuff missing. It's unfortunate. I think Red is better presented in some ways, but in less useful ways in another fashion. And yeah, it just doesn't feel like it learnt from the past. I don't know why. It's disappointing. Truffle says on an old video about the future of science fiction, I'm very much wondering what you're going to think of the God Help Us All New Babylon 5 show. I thought that was not going ahead now. I mean, the writer's strike is going to throw everything for a loop, but I'm not sure. I was excited to hear it was going ahead, and that JMS was involved, so that means it can't be that bad, doesn't it? But yeah. Boom, boom, boom. What else have we got? On the Kalergi Plan video, again, Virgil502 says, hashtag expose the nose. So I think we all know what he's getting at there. I'm not actually Jewish. We did have some Jewish family in London at some point, I believe. But no, I'm not Jewish, or black, or mixed, or, well, past the extent that all British people are mixed, but yeah. Virgil also says, good God, this guy must be all hopped up on crack cocaine. Crack never really made it big over here, and yet again, that's not an argument, nor a refutation. Okay, so also on the Kalergi Plan video, as part of that, as one point in a collection of points about how people travel more these days, right? How international flights at a relatively affordable level have allowed people to travel, vehicles have allowed people to travel, the internet and telephony has allowed people to make contact all over the place. So amongst the many other reasons for people mixing and wanting to emigrate or immigrate, I mentioned that there is a tendency, scientifically confirmable, that people are often attracted to the exotic. So, yeah, interracial marriages are pretty damn common, more than the racists would like to think. But Sam Potkins 4705 says, I'm not interested in black women at all. I mean, okay, bully for you, you're allowed your tastes, but you're not everyone. And the tendency is that people are either attracted to those similar to them or radically different to them. And if you think about it, that kind of makes sense from a genetic point of view. So I don't really understand what their issue is exactly, or why they thought I was speaking for everyone, or why I thought I was speaking for them. But yeah, I mean, his other comments, he goes on to say, I know Britain is ruined, but no one goes to Europe to meet black people. I mean, we live here, and people of all kinds live here. I don't think it's a matter of going to Europe to meet anyone in particular. It's going to see functional social democracies and history and art and culture, the things America lacks. He also then goes on to say, negrified. That sounds filthier than it is, but it is pretty filthy. More abuse from the racist set. OTP Yasua says, have you ever read the book Animal Farm? You are the fucking horse from that book. You are a gullible, stupid, brainwashed, dumb fuck. Irony. That's my RDA of irony. 700 people coming on boats per day. Do you understand how tiny an amount that is compared to the population, and how many of those are not given asylum? I mean, yeah, it's bollocks. It's all bollocks. We're almost done. I'm only ever going to do a week at a time, I think. Fjordkeeper says, alright, I'll buy some books. He seemed like a solid dude for the most part. Any recommendations? That was on the Sexbots Redux announcement video. So I gave him a few recommendations, but if you want to buy anything from me, go to post-mort.com or lulu.com and you can buy various things. So an old one here. Ages ago I talked about Swordsfall kind of disappearing and cancelling everything. I did say he was a grifter and got called all sorts of names for it, but here you go. Timothy M. Reynolds stumbled across my video and says, I backed his Kickstarter. He and Oliver Clegg cyberbullied me on Twitter after I'd promoted his Kickstarter. He definitely sucks. Yeah, he does, and I think it was obvious to a lot of people, but other people just wouldn't hear it, would they? So one of the we brought up AI art again on the release of Sexbots Redux, because the cover image is reworked and worked over AI, which annoyed some people, made it difficult to promote in some other places. We're still trying to navigate through the AI issue here at Postmortem. But Todd Zurcher says, the US Copyright Office's policy on AI art is that only humans can hold a copyright. So my metric is that you're free to use AI generation as a pre or post process to a human generated work. I like the phrase digitally enhanced or AI collaboration. If you're forced to declare part of your workflow. Given the capabilities of Photoshop and other graphical tools, the line between human and machine was blurred long before AI generation gained people's attention. I have no pity or patience for the Luddites, fearmongers, or grifters. I do. And I think the inclusion of AI issues in the writers' strike shows part of the problem, right? Because if you work as a writer, you get a relatively high fee, and you should be getting residuals, but they're not. That's part of the problem here. But what they want to do now is just pay a single writer to write a pilot episode, use AI to churn out shoddy kind of episode skeletons, and then have a writer's room do what's called a polish on that work. And that way you would earn tens of thousands of dollars and potentially residuals for doing an actual writing job. Doing a polish is like a tenth of the pay, because it is less work, but it's all a cheeky blag. So I understand people's unease, but in an industry with such low margins, such razor thin margins, and where we get ripped off constantly, it is tempting to use AI. Now I'm trying to limit myself. I'm going to spend the same sort of amount that I would on any project, and then I'm going to supplement with AI art or AI human collaboration art. It's certainly useful for me to run off something to show an artist, to say, I want something a bit like this. So, there's that. But the hostility is going to end up being harmful, I think, in the long run. We'll find a new equilibrium eventually, at some point. And that takes us back to 7 days. So, I may have missed some earlier comments because I missed a week, but there you go. Hopefully more reviews coming along next week, and I've got Roll for Insight coming out the wazoo. So, look forward to that. Zang.
Flick Pig. There's no big story to this. Even the title's just a way to get away with writing Fuck Pig. It's not some earth-shaking attempt to thrust upon you the evils of meat eating. I eat meat because it's fucking delicious. David Cameron got me thinking about pigs. Then I got into some arguments with vegans. Then I made a horror dungeon game in which you play pigs trying to escape a horrible, fantastical slaughterhouse. That's about it. If that upsets you, do one. A print-and-play OSR dungeon crawl with pigs. Available at post-mort.com and drive-through RPG.